11 female vulnerabilities that give you total control. Machiavelli would use them today. Did you know that Machiavelli didn't write for good men? He wrote for men who wanted to win. Not to please people, not to look good, to win. And if he were alive today, he wouldn't talk to you about beautiful love, soulmates, or eternal promises. He would talk about psychological power, about how attraction really works when no one is pretending, about why some men always end up being chased, while others always end up being replaced. Machiavelli understood something that is still uncomfortable, but true today. In every relationship, there is a silent struggle for emotional control, and the one who loves more doesn't win. The one who needs less does. Today, you're going to understand 11 female vulnerabilities that repeat themselves like a mathematical pattern in attraction. 11 blind spots that determine who invests, who chases, and who ends up begging for attention at 2 a.m., staring at a seen message on WhatsApp. While most men over-explain, apologize for existing, and give away their attention as if it were worthless, others understand these rules and completely change the dynamic, not because they manipulate, but because they stop acting from a place of scarcity. And listen carefully, because vulnerability number 11 is what separates the average man from the man who is impossible to replace. Many understand the first 10 and still lose everything because they fail to understand the last one. And there's something else. The 10th vulnerability is so powerful that if you use it correctly, it can change a woman's behavior in less than 7 days. Not because you control her, but because it touches the exact point where her mind stops playing games and starts taking you seriously. If you leave before the end, you'll understand the game, but you won't win it. Now here's an uncomfortable truth. You don't lose women because you don't have money. You don't lose them because you lack charm. You lose them because you're predictable, because you're always available, because you reply too quickly, because you explain everything, because you become a habit. And what becomes a habit is no longer desired. It gets used. Machiavelli said it differently, but the principle is the same. The one who controls access controls the game. Most men believe that to attract someone, they have to give more. More messages, more explanations, more validation, more presence. And the only thing they accomplish is lowering their value until she no longer feels the risk of losing them. The day a woman feels she already has you guaranteed, something switches off. Not all at once, little by little. And by the time you realize it, she no longer desires you. She just uses you. Today you're going to learn how to do the opposite. How to make your presence felt even when you're not there. How to give just enough at exactly the right moment, with exactly the right intensity. How to respond without begging, without chasing, and without negotiating your dignity. But if you're not willing to stick with this until the end, you'd better close the video now, because once you understand these rules, there's no going back. Before we continue, do this. Write the word control in the comments, not for the algorithm, but for yourself, because at the end, I'm going to give you one single sentence. One exact sentence that activates the 10th vulnerability without arguing, without justifying yourself, and without getting caught up in drama. That sentence is where many men either regain respect or lose it forever. Now then, the first vulnerability, the most obvious, the most addictive, is the need for external validation. You see it every day on Instagram, on WhatsApp, in questions that seem innocent, but aren't. Did you like it? How do I look? Is everything okay with you? Why are you acting weird? Every one of these is a micro-test. They're not looking for information. They're looking for emotional supply. They're looking to confirm that they still have your attention. When you don't understand this, you react like everyone else. You applaud, you compliment, you reassure, you reply instantly. Automatic validation. Once you understand this, everything changes. Imagine this scene. You're both out with friends. She shares an achievement, something small but important to her. The average man reacts immediately. Wow, that's amazing. You're perfect. Seriously, you're incredible. She smiles. But internally, she registers it as noise because it was free, because it was automatic, because it carried no weight. Validation isn't affection, it's energy. It's attention given with discernment. And when you hand it out without any filter, your value goes down. When you give it with intention, your value goes up. The silent mistake most men make is giving validation to feel secure, to keep her from losing interest, to keep her from leaving, to calm their own fears. And the exact opposite happens. When your validation is always available, it stops being a reward and becomes an expectation. That's why selective validation isn't coldness. It's emotional leadership. It's saying, without saying it, not everything earns my approval. And when you finally give it, it carries weight. An automatic good job is worth nothing. A calm, sincere compliment given at exactly the right moment is worth more than 100 desperate compliments. But here's the first serious warning. When you start doing this well, she changes. Sometimes she reaches out more. Sometimes she jokes to provoke you. Sometimes she makes ambiguous comments. Sometimes she tests you with something that sounds like a joke, but isn't. And if you react badly to that first test, you can lose her respect in a single night, even after doing everything else right. I'm not going to explain that yet. You'll understand it later, because that's where it becomes clear whether you're a solid man or just another man who learned the theory. Let's move on to the second vulnerability, the relationship with uncertainty. The human mind hates a vacuum. It needs closure. It wants to predict. It wants to understand. But in attraction, uncertainty, when handled well, is pure fuel. When everything is clear, guaranteed, and fully explained, there's no tension, no anticipation, no excitement. Predictability kills desire faster than rejection ever could. Here's a classic scenario. She texts you at 9:10. You always reply at 9:11. Same tone, same rhythm, every single day. And you think that makes you a good man, attentive, reliable. But without realizing it, you've become a comfortable emotional service. Predictable, replaceable. The kind of uncertainty that works isn't disappearing because you're insecure. It isn't punishing someone with silence. It isn't playing mind games. It's having your own life, your own rhythm, replying when you can, not when you feel pressured, not giving a full report of your day, leaving natural spaces without feeling the need to explain them. She fills those gaps with her own mind, and when the mind fills in the blanks, it becomes emotionally invested. But be careful, this only works if your life has real substance. Otherwise, uncertainty turns into emptiness. And sustained emptiness is perceived as a lack of depth. This is where many men think they're playing the game well, when in reality they're just being used as emotional backup. And there's one very specific sign that shows you've already crossed that line. Almost no one notices it, and by the time they do, it's already too late. That sign appears just before she mentally moves you into a different category. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. I'll reveal it when we reach the point where most men lose everything, even after doing everything right. That brings us to the third vulnerability, the difference between a woman thinking about you and feeling deeply connected to you. Many men believe that listening is enough. It isn't. Anyone can listen. What's rare is reflecting back what you hear, recognizing the emotion behind the words, naming it accurately, and validating it without exaggerating it. When you do that, something changes. Her body relaxes. Her voice softens. Her gaze lingers for a second longer, because she feels she doesn't have to explain herself anymore. You already understand. But here's the trap. The moment she opens up, many men lose their footing. They rush ahead. They become overly emotional, too available. They mistake connection for attachment. And without realizing it, they cross an invisible line. There's no argument, no drama. She simply moves them into a lower category. If you don't understand this point, it doesn't matter how well you handled the first two. Sooner or later, you'll lose your position. Stay with me, because in the next part, we're entering the point where most men make the mistake of thinking they've already won. And that's where respect is either lost or secured for good. Let's continue exactly where it matters. Because if you've made it this far, you've already noticed something most people ignore. Attraction isn't about making a woman feel good. It's about not losing your position when emotions run high. And this is exactly where many men, even those who do almost everything right, fall without realizing it. The fourth vulnerability appears when her energy changes. One day she's warm and close. The next day, she's distant. She doesn't announce it. She doesn't explain it. It just happens. And in that brief moment, it becomes clear whether you have emotional stability or whether your emotional state depends on hers. The insecure man reacts. He asks what happened. He explains himself. He changes his tone. He adjusts his behavior. He chases clarity. He thinks he's fixing something. But in reality, he's handing over control of his emotional state. The man with emotional stability does the opposite. He notices. He feels. But he doesn't react from anxiety. He keeps his own rhythm. He doesn't punish. He doesn't become intentionally cold. He doesn't create drama. He simply remains himself. And when she comes back, she finds the same man she left. That small detail, which seems insignificant, builds respect because she understands something important. She may be able to come closer to you, but she can't shake your foundation. When a woman realizes she doesn't control your emotional state, she starts treating you with more care, not out of fear, but because she perceives greater value. Well-grounded emotional stability is deeply attractive, but be careful. Being centered doesn't mean being indifferent. It doesn't mean not caring about anything. Being centered means feeling your emotions without becoming a slave to them, listening without absorbing everything, being present without losing yourself. When you achieve that, you create a rare and powerful combination: closeness and challenge at the same time, security without dependence, connection without possession. And that combination prepares the ground for the fifth vulnerability. The fifth vulnerability appears during chaos, arguments, stress, pressure, frustration, the moments when she isn't at her best. This is where attraction is truly tested, not on easy days, but when emotions overflow. In those moments, her emotional system evaluates only one thing. Do you fall apart along with her, or do you remain steady? Many men confuse supporting someone with matching their emotional intensity. They raise their voices. They get pulled into the conflict. They argue. They defend themselves. And without realizing it, they become part of the chaos. When that happens, her brain registers danger, not consciously, instinctively. And when there is danger, attraction pulls back. Real emotional steadiness is the opposite. You slow the pace. You speak more calmly. You say less. You listen without giving up your position. One clear sentence, one calm boundary, and you hold your ground. No threats, no over-explaining, no endless justifications. You stay there, steady, without fear, without drama. That calmness doesn't kill emotion. It regulates it. Her body begins to settle, not because you're controlling her, but because your presence becomes a point of stability. Many women test this without even realizing it, not out of malice, out of necessity. They need to know whether the man in front of them can remain steady when they themselves can't. If you fail, respect drops. If you pass, something deeper than attraction begins to form: instinctive trust. And when that trust appears, she starts seeing you differently. That's where the sixth vulnerability comes in, one of the most uncomfortable for many men, because real status can't be faked for very long. Not money, not designer brands, not titles. Presence, the way you carry yourself, the way you occupy space, the way other people respond to your energy when you're not trying to impress anyone. Women notice these things all the time, even if they never mention them. How does a waiter treat you? How do other men respond to you? Do they respect you? Do they follow your lead? Do they correct you? Real status isn't announced, it's perceived. And once it's perceived, attraction naturally reorganizes itself. Imagine a simple situation. You're somewhere, and someone interrupts you. They talk over you. The insecure man usually does one of two things. He laughs nervously to be liked, or he explodes to assert himself. Both lose. The man with real status simply looks at the person, and when he speaks, his words carry weight. He doesn't shout. He doesn't shrink. He doesn't ask permission to exist. He says little. He speaks clearly. Then he moves on. That kind of presence shows up in the small details. Your posture, your tone of voice, your economy of words. Not over-explaining, not competing for attention, not justifying every decision. Being comfortable in your own place. That comfort communicates value. It isn't arrogance. Arrogance is loud. Quiet status doesn't need to prove anything. There's a common trap here. People confuse status with being tough, cold, or dismissive. That's not status. That's insecurity wearing a disguise. Real status is calm, steady, consistent. And when a woman notices it, she starts measuring something else. How seriously do you take yourself? Because from this point on, something dangerous happens for many men. They think they've already won. They let their guard down. They get comfortable. And that's exactly when the decline begins. The next stage isn't about creating more attraction. It's about refusing to let your boundaries be crossed. And if you're not prepared for that, everything you've built up to this point starts to fade. There's a subtle signal that appears when you set a calm boundary. It's small, almost invisible. If she responds one way, you know there's respect. If she responds another way, you know she sees you as the comfortable option. That signal can't be hidden, and it appears right before the point where the dynamic changes forever. I'm not going to reveal it just yet. You'll recognize it when we reach the exact moment where most men fail. By now, you already have something most people don't. Position. Emotional stability under pressure. Calmness in the middle of chaos. A presence that people naturally notice. With that alone, you're already above average, but you're still not impossible to replace, because attraction doesn't decide that. What decides it is what you do when someone crosses a line. In the next part, we enter the territory where many men sabotage themselves while believing they're simply being mature. Consistency between words and actions. True masculine direction. Being available without becoming low value. And the final step before the moment where the dynamic changes forever. Stay with me, because what's coming next doesn't just increase desire. It makes losing you feel like a real risk. If you're still here, it's because you've already understood something most people refuse to accept. Attraction isn't what fails. Consistency is. Many men reach this point convinced they've done everything right. They created interest. They sparked emotion. They maintained their presence. And yet, something still falls apart. Not suddenly, quietly. That breakdown begins the moment the relationship grows closer and the first inconsistencies appear. This is where the seventh vulnerability comes in. The seventh vulnerability appears when she starts feeling comfortable, when she's no longer trying to impress you, and you're no longer trying to impress her. That's when she stops evaluating only how she feels with you and starts evaluating whether you take yourself seriously. She watches one very specific thing: the consistency between what you say and what you do, and more importantly, how you respond when there's a contradiction. People say a lot of things. Honesty is the most important thing to me. I can't stand being ignored. I hate games. But then they show up late without saying anything. They disappear when something doesn't benefit them. They change their story. They make excuses. And most men, afraid of making things uncomfortable or losing her, stay silent. They tell themselves it's not a big deal, that it isn't worth arguing about, that it's better to let it go, that silence isn't maturity, it's fear wearing a disguise. And every time you do it, you teach something without saying a single word. Your standards are negotiable. The man who masters this point doesn't accuse or argue. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't create drama. He observes. He remembers. And when the right moment comes, he calmly brings the conversation back to consistency. You said this was important to you. Pause. That's why this caught my attention. Nothing more. No irony, no sarcasm, no blame. Just clarity. That moment creates two things at once: exposure and respect. Exposure, because she realizes you're paying attention. You're not distracted. You're not asleep at the wheel. Respect, because you're not attacking her. You're simply maintaining a standard. Many men avoid this because they're afraid of losing her. But here's the truth that few people want to accept. When you don't stand for consistency, you're already losing yourself. And once you lose yourself, sooner or later, she'll lose you too. When a woman realizes that you remember what she says, notice what she does, and aren't afraid to calmly point out inconsistencies, she stops seeing you as just another emotional option. She starts seeing you as a man with judgment. That judgment opens the door to the 8th vulnerability, one of the most important and least discussed: direction. I'm not talking about having your entire life figured out or knowing everything. I'm talking about not being lost, not drifting through life, not reacting to everything happening around you. Many men are physically present, but internally adrift. They change their opinions depending on who's in front of them. They seek approval before making decisions. They ask too many questions. They doubt everything. And without realizing it, they place the woman in a position that kills attraction, the position of having to lead them. No woman wants to carry a man's emotional direction. She may do it for a while, but eventually it exhausts her. It drains her. It wears her down. And once that spark fades, she starts looking elsewhere for what she no longer feels with you. Real direction isn't announced. It's felt. It's knowing what you want and acting accordingly. Even if not everyone agrees, it's making decisions without asking for emotional permission. It's moving forward with calm confidence. When a man has direction, he doesn't need to impose it. He simply moves forward. Whoever wants to walk beside him does. Whoever doesn't stays behind. That creates a sense of security. And security, when grounded, is deeply attractive because it communicates something simple and powerful. This man knows where he's going, with me or without me. That perception changes the entire dynamic. You're no longer someone who merely reacts to life. You're someone who leads it. But here's a dangerous trap. Many people confuse direction with rigidity, with harshness, with control. That's not direction. That's insecurity in disguise. Authentic direction is flexible, but firm. It listens, but it decides. It considers, but it moves forward. It doesn't feel the need to justify every step, and that natural confidence is what makes it attractive. Now we arrive at the 9th vulnerability, one of the most misunderstood: the relationship between confidence and availability. Most people believe that to create a sense of security, you have to always be there, always reply, always adapt, always give in. And once again, the opposite happens. The kind of security that keeps desire alive doesn't come from absolute certainty. It comes from constant choice. When a woman feels she has you no matter what, her emotional system relaxes too much. The tension drops, the investment drops, the care drops. But when she feels you're present because you choose to be, not because you need to be, something shifts. She starts valuing you more, taking greater care of the relationship, investing more, not out of fear, but because she perceives your value. This isn't achieved by disappearing or playing childish games. It's achieved by having a life that doesn't revolve around one person. Real priorities, your own rhythm, natural boundaries. When someone cancels plans at the last minute, and you always accept it without a second thought, you teach them that your time has little value. When you keep your schedule, your composure, and your dignity, you teach them that being with you is a choice, not an entitlement. That balance is subtle, but powerful. You're available without being automatic, close without being dependent, present without losing yourself. And when a man achieves that, the dynamic changes without a single word. She begins asking herself something new. What happens if I lose him? Not in a dramatic way, in a quiet one. And when that thought appears, it's a sign that she no longer sees you as emotional backup, but as someone of real value. This is where many men sabotage themselves. They notice she's investing more, and they rush to make everything certain again. They cancel their own plans. They change their priorities. They adapt too much. And without realizing it, they destroy the very tension they created. The key is understanding this. Availability with value isn't explained. It's lived. You don't say, "I'm busy." You simply are busy. You don't threaten to leave. You simply refuse to tolerate what doesn't align with your standards. And all of this brings us right to the edge of the most delicate point. Because once attraction, respect, direction, and genuine investment are in place, the defining moment arrives. The moment that reveals whether your boundaries are real or just nice-sounding words. That moment gives no warning. It appears in small, almost invisible ways. A comment, a joke, a moment of disrespect disguised as humor, a subtle act of manipulation, a repeated inconsistency. What you do in that moment determines whether everything you've built becomes solid or falls apart. In the next and final part, we reach the 10th vulnerability, the point where the dynamic changes forever, the decisive break, the exact sentence, the action that many men are afraid to take. And because of that fear, they lose everything. And after that comes the 11th vulnerability, the one that supports everything else when no one is watching. Integrity. Stay with me, because what comes next isn't about impressing anyone. It's about never betraying yourself again. If you've made it this far, you're no longer looking for techniques to make people like you. You're looking for something far more dangerous, the ability to stop betraying yourself when the pressure begins. Everything we've covered so far leads to this point. Attraction can be sparked through selective validation, uncertainty, presence, and direction. But it only becomes solid when real boundaries appear. And this is where most men fail, even intelligent men, even men who already believe they understand the game. The 10th vulnerability isn't a clever phrase or a psychological trick, it's an internal decision. It comes into play when a woman crosses a boundary. And it isn't always something dramatic. Sometimes it's a disrespectful comment disguised as a joke. Sometimes it's a small but repeated act of disrespect. Sometimes it's subtle emotional manipulation. Sometimes it's an inconsistency you've noticed before but chose to ignore. That exact moment changes everything. The average man reacts in one of two ways. He either negotiates, he explains, he spends hours justifying himself, trying to make her understand, or he explodes, he gets angry, he says things he later regrets, then he comes back. Both reactions communicate the same thing. His boundaries aren't real. And when a woman realizes your boundaries are flexible, the entire dynamic shifts. It doesn't matter how much attraction there was before. It doesn't matter how strong the connection felt. Respect begins to erode. The man who masters this vulnerability does something completely different. He doesn't argue over his standards. He doesn't threaten. He doesn't create drama. He isn't trying to win the conversation. He acts. He lowers his voice. He stays calm. He looks her in the eye. He says very little. Then he follows through. That action, more than the words themselves, is what resets the entire dynamic. At the right moment, he says something short and clear. This doesn't align with who I am. Pause. I don't continue relationships with this kind of dynamic. Then he walks away, not to provoke, not to manipulate, but to respect himself. He doesn't need to convince anyone. He doesn't need to explain himself. He doesn't need her to agree. Because respect isn't negotiated, it's lived. Something important happens here. In less than 24 hours, her mind goes on alert. Because she's no longer dealing with a man who tolerates disrespect out of fear. She's dealing with a man whose boundaries have real consequences. She may react with pride, with anger, with tears, with tests, with silence. It doesn't matter. What matters is what her mind registers. With you, respect is not negotiable. This is the point where many men feel terrified, afraid of losing her, afraid of ending up alone, afraid they've gone too far. But here's the truth that very few people are willing to accept. If you're not willing to lose someone who repeatedly crosses your boundaries, you've already lost yourself. And once you lose yourself, sooner or later, they'll lose you too. Now here's the exact sentence I promised at the beginning, the one that activates this vulnerability without arguments, drama, or endless explanations. Use it only if you're prepared to back it up with your actions. If you're not, don't use it. I don't stay where respect is lost. I sincerely wish you the best, nothing more. No explanations, no debates, no long messages, no lengthy paragraphs. What ends cleanly carries weight, and what carries weight reshapes the dynamic. That sentence isn't meant to control anyone. It's meant to bring closure, and ending something with dignity is one of the strongest signals of self-respect there is. When a man follows through with that decision, even once in his life, something changes forever. He no longer tolerates what he once accepted. He no longer trades his self-respect for attention. He no longer betrays himself out of fear of being alone. And ironically, from that point forward, people begin treating him very differently, not out of fear, out of respect. That brings us to the 11th and final vulnerability, the quietest one of all, the one that supports everything else when no one is watching. Integrity. Integrity isn't what you say in a video. It isn't what you promise during a conversation. It's what you do when no one is watching. How do you speak to yourself? How do you handle frustration? How do you make difficult decisions? How do you get back up when things don't go the way you expected? Women notice these things without evidence, without conscious reasoning, without needing an explanation. They sense them through intuition, because your energy reveals the consistency between who you are and how you live. A man can talk about standards without actually having any. He can talk about self-control while being ruled by his anxiety. He can talk about dignity while selling it for attention. Integrity is when your actions and your identity never contradict each other, when you don't make excuses, when you don't abandon yourself, when you don't betray yourself just to avoid being alone. When a woman recognizes integrity, something very unusual happens. She stops seeing you as just another option. She starts seeing you as someone steady, a complete man, not perfect, complete. And that perception changes everything, because desire can rise and fall, emotions can come and go, but respect is what holds everything together. And without respect, nothing lasts. This is where many men ruin everything. They hear about these 11 vulnerabilities and try to apply all of them at once. They become obsessed with execution. They grow rigid, they become artificial, and they end up right back where they started, acting from neediness. That's why the key isn't doing more, it's being more consistent. Let me simplify it so you don't lose the point. This week, choose just one thing, just one, and truly live it. If your problem is that you're always chasing, stop giving away validation. If your problem is that people see you as guaranteed, reclaim your own rhythm of life. If your problem is that you lose yourself emotionally, work on becoming more centered. If your problem is that you tolerate disrespect, enforce your boundary once, calmly, and through your actions. There will be women who don't fit with this level of standards, and that's a good thing, because when you raise your standards, you begin to filter. And a man who filters no longer begs, he no longer over-explains, he no longer chases attention. If this video gave you clarity, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Not for the algorithm, for yourself. To mark the exact moment you stopped acting from a place of scarcity and started acting from calm self-control. This isn't about winning someone over, it's about never losing yourself again. And when a man stops losing himself, he stops being replaceable. Yeah.